Hey guys, and welcome to this tutorial. So today we're going to be looking at layering human flesh tones on a Space Marine. I'll be using this chaplain for the example. Really simple technique, just practicing simple layering without using ink washes or anything, and it's a great way to begin learning how to both water down paint, how to build up those layers and improve your skills. Faces are a great place to begin. It might seem daunting, but it's such a small area, and with faces there's so many colors that you can use, you just can't go wrong. And it will improve your skills, and you'll be able to use those skills in other areas on the miniature. So I thought it was a great place to begin, and yeah, let's get into it. So to begin with, we're going to be using these colors here. There we go. So if you don't have these colors, that's fine. You're just looking for something that's a tanned color, you know, a little bit of brown and red in it, something like that. Whichever color or brand of paint you want to use. Then we're using some Kislev flesh there as well, and some Cadian. So if you have a look at the way the colors go, is that in focus? There we go. So it's like a brown base building up with a brown to yellow mid-tone, and then a sort of lighter, paler tone on top, and then finally you'll have a little bit of white mixed in for final highlights. And it might seem, as I said, daunting to begin with, but it is really fun and easy to do, and yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so first step is the base color. So we're going to use the Bugman's Glow or a similar dark tan. We're going to add some water to our paint. Always add a few drops of water to your paint to dilute it down, and what that's going to give you is a consistency somewhere between milk and cream, I guess. Should draw off the brush nice and easy. Rotate your brush around and you'll see it draw off the end, and you should end up with a nice smooth finish. So yeah, a couple of drops with every, I guess, dollop, so 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, and that should work. So once you have the brush loaded up, this is just a mid-sized brush like a 1 or a 2, we're going to get into putting the base coat on. So we just go here and we start putting on that base color, and if it seems a little bit watered down like that is, just add a little bit more paint to the mix, and there we go, and that should improve. Basically you don't want it to run, but thin enough so it goes on smooth. So I'm just going to go through here and base coat that skin in this Bugman's Glow, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, so once we've got the base coat on, now we're looking at the base color of the flesh. So Bugman's Glow is only just there to remove the black. So I ended up using two thin coats, and this gives you a pretty clean, even look. And now we're looking at which color we're going to start with for the shadows of the flesh. So we have the Cadian flesh out on the palette, and we're going to mix a small amount of the Bugman's Glow into that to create a sort of mid-tone between the two. Not exactly 50-50, but somewhere just a tint darker than the Cadian flesh, because the Cadian flesh is what we're going to use for the majority of the flesh tone. We want something a little darker just to be the shadow, but not too dark. If you were to just put Cadian flesh straight over the top and leave the shadows on the face, it would be too stark a contrast. So we're going to go somewhere just a little bit darker than Cadian flesh. So that's why we have it on the palette next to one another, and you can just mix it together. So I've put that out, but we still need to add a couple of drops of water to thin that Cadian flesh down. There we go. And now we can begin mixing. So you just draw it across, and you should end up with something that's a little darker than the Cadian flesh. And there we go. So something around about here is where we want to go. So once we've got that, we're going to begin doing the same thing we did before, and we're going to basically base coat. Is that in focus? There we go. Okay, we're good to go. So we just paint that on, and you can leave a small amount of the Bugman's Glow in some of the deepest recesses, so inside the eye, underneath the nose, or in the deepest part of under the cheekbone and so on. You can leave a little bit, or even around the edge where the metal, I don't know what that is, but the thing that's around him, the little metal components, the bionics, you could leave a small amount of the Bugman's Glow there, just to show that the flesh is sort of discoloring or maybe reacting with the metal that's sitting in his head. So we just go through and do all the raised areas, the majority, and just build that up. And as I said, leaving maybe small areas where that darker color is, but pretty much base coating it. And going through and applying that end of the nose, the cheek, under the eye there. But you can see, there we go. You can see that you can leave a small amount, and it starts to bring up those shades. So I'll go through and do that, and we'll be back in a second to take a look at it. Okay, so now we have the base layer of the flesh. So as you can see, I've left a little bit of the Bugman's Glow around the edges just to start the beginning process of the shadows, but most of it has been painted with that mid-tone color that we just put on. And yeah, it's starting to look like a face, and we haven't used any ink washes or anything, and you're starting to build up those shadows. So the next layer is going to be the Cadian flesh straight from the pot, and now we want to start leaving the shadow areas. So any of the deep recesses on the face that you see, inside the eye, around the mouth, under the nose and so on, around the edges of the head where it meets the other materials, we want to leave a little bit more of that shadow. So we're progressively moving up to the top of the surface, just like if you imagine you know, an apple being, or an orange in the sun. The top peak of it will be the brightest, and as it goes around the sphere it gets darker and darker, and there's a shadow occurring. That's kind of how you want to imagine it when you're doing a face. So it's the same thing, it's basically a sphere, and you're just building up those shadows up to the top where the light's hitting. So most miniatures are painted with the light from above, and that's what you're trying to do. So we're going to start now with the Cadian flesh. Again, a little bit of water with the paint, and we're going to add this color to the tops of the brow and across the top of the forehead, leaving a bit of shadow around the temple and the creases in his forehead there to show the shadows. And if I can get that in focus for you, you should be able to start to see some shadowing going on there. There we go, that's a little better. So you can see how the shadows are starting to build up. Nice and smooth, quick, easy blend. And we're almost there. Okay, we're back in a second. Okay, so now we have some definition going on. We put the Cadian flesh on to begin that process of highlighting it, and you can start to see the shadows in the jaw there, in the eyes, under the nose, a little bit in that forehead, the crease across the brow, back of the head. Okay, and that's it. You could pretty much stop there if you wanted to, but we want to go a little further than this just to bring out the face a little more. And so we're going to be using a little bit of that Kislev flesh in the same manner that we did for the undertone. We're going to mix a bit of Kislev flesh with the Cadian to create a mid-tone, and we're going to use that as the highlight. And you could stop right there after that highlight, and it would be perfectly fine if you're doing batch painting on regular models. But because this is a chaplain and we want to go a little further, I'll show you how to highlight it up a little bit more than that to achieve a little bit more punch in that flesh tone. So I'll be back in a second and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so we're back. First, a couple of drops of water into that Kislev flesh. Make sure it's thinned down and start dragging it across to create that tone that's just a little bit darker than the Kislev flesh. And there we go. Should have something like that. Okay, and so now what we want to do is really just pick out the raised areas of the head. So on top of the head, receding up to the top, across the top of the nose, the cheeks, the brow line, around the mouth, and that should be it. Possibly just a little bit under the eye, but not too much. You want to keep that relatively dark. Okay, so we start off and just pop it across the top there, top of the nose, cheeks there, and you just keep adding it until you get the desired look. You'll feel it coming together. The blend will start to work as you add these layers. So it's a little bright, but you should be able to see that highlight coming up. Okay, so I'll continue with this. I'll be back in a second. And there we have it, simple flesh. So you could stop right here and that would be really great, and you could do that across your whole army. Just teaching you the basics of layering, and it will improve your skills, and you'll end up with something really nice. If you want to go further, you could use the Kislev flesh and then mix with a little bit of white to further highlight the edges, but this is a great place to begin. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I'll show you a finished product of what it looks like at the end under better lighting conditions. But yeah, give it a go. It's really fun and enjoyable, and I hope you have a good time with it. Okay, I'll catch you on the next one, guys.